Well, hi guys, and welcome to another version of the Camo Matrix videocast. In this video, we're going to be discussing what you should be doing in the deer off season, specifically right after the deer season with Eddie Claypool. And if you remember last time we talked to him, we were out in the Wyoming Rockies, but this time we're linking up with him in a video chat from his property in Kansas. And before we get into that, I actually just want to quickly mention that during the off season, I've received the Moultrie Edge2 Pro camera, this one here, and I've also got the Power Mag. And I'm going to throw some specs up on the screen that you can take a look at. I'm going to be using it to catalog the deer that are on a hunting property that I'm using that's local to me here. And also something else that I used during this last season was the Princeton Tek 420 RW kit. And what the cool thing is about this is a headlamp, uses AAA batteries, but the cool thing about it is that it's modular. So it goes from a headlamp where I can be wearing it on my head here, and I can remove it from that clip. I can place it in this other part that comes with it, and then I can take this clip that comes with it and I can hang it vertically in a tent, on a tree. If I needed to be working on something that was below me, I can remove that clip from this location, and then I can place it on another one, and it'll actually be sideways, and so it's a horizontal light. And this is the other cool thing that I thought was interesting. So I put this on a shed antler. This is a bar clamp that would go with it, and the cool thing about it is that the way that it clips on is you could put this on your handlebars and you've pretty much got a light. So if you've got, either you're running a bicycle or something like that, getting into non-motorized areas while you're hunting, this is a pretty cool light, and I enjoy using it this year, especially when I was out using it in the dark and I needed to have a light in a certain place rather than just on my head. So those are some interesting things to check out. I've got specs for both the Moultrie, the Mobile Edge 2 Pro on the screen, and also the Princeton Tek 450 RW kit. Check out those specs. There's something that you might want to be interested in, but let's listen to what Eddie has to say. I think especially now, probably the topic that a lot of guys they're thinking of two things. One is going to be turkey season, but the other one is they're coming off their deer season, and they got to learn a little bit. But so the key would be is like what does someone need to do in the off season to really prepare for next season, and whether or not they've got land of their own or if they've got private or public land that they've got to go out and get into. What would the things that you would do is either one. Now, you've got private land and you've got public land that you go out and you hunt on.
Right.
Do you do much in the off season in preparation?
Absolutely. I've written plenty of stuff about this over the years. It's a very important part of what used to really feather my nest on whitetail season, was what I would do in January through March. That's when you need to do your scouting.
And that's because you're not really impacting the area.
It's because all the sign of what your deer did all fall was laid there fresh for you to see, and you can totally learn travel routes, bedding areas, feeding areas. I mean, nobody's around. The woods are open. You can see good, so you can spot rubs a long ways. You can spot trails and scrapes. And if you really want to learn the general movement pattern of the deer for the area you're in, you need to get out there and put your feet on your area in February and March before it greens up and gets thick and nasty and people start showing up. Because unless something massive changes from year to year in your area, like such as land development or big time crop rotation, if something big doesn't change, then what happened the previous fall, those deer will be doing pretty much the same thing the next fall. And So all you got to do is just go out there, take your topo map or something, mark all the trails, mark all the scrapes, mark all the rubs, uh, then get on maybe your technology and see where the access routes are, and just make you a little diagram of your area. And then it should come to you pretty easy where to be when, and the access to it and things like that.
So this would go for places that you have hunted and that you may be looking to hunt for the next
And
year.
yeah, especially if you're going to new spots. There's been many a time over my lifetime to where I would have, pages in my whitetail life closed due to loss of access or something happening. I've moved my center of attention probably a half dozen times in 40 years. None of my good places ever lasted. Something would come along like, they'd sell or somebody would lease them, or maybe outfitters would come in and take it over and I'd have to go elsewhere. And I would always reserve from the end of bow season on to spring as a time to set up a couple of 2-day trips. And I mean, I know it's a lot of work and it's probably a little bit more than some people want to invest, but many has been the time that I would get off work on a Friday evening from pipe fitting and literally drive till midnight and get to my hunting area, say in Illinois, Iowa, Western Kansas, wherever I was at for the following year, and spend the next 2 days from daylight till dark scouting, walking 10, 15 miles in a day, and I might not get out of a square mile or two when I do that. I mean, I would cover it. If you'll crawl in your hunting spots and look them over in the dead of winter, those trails are so evident. Those scrapes are all there. The rubs are just looking to be, spotted from 100 yards away. You can figure out what the deer are doing like crazy in the off season. And then it's just a matter of going in there and putting up. I would often carry my pole saws and my hand saws and different things with me. And when I found spots, I'd go ahead and cut them out right then, And one little small thing that might seem insignificant, but if you're the guy that's going to work this hard and do this, when you go in there and cut that stuff out, keep in mind that there's going to be a full growing season take place before you set in that tree. So you're going to have shoots off the limbs that may grow 3 feet long. So oftentimes I'd cut stuff out and realize I should have cut it out a foot or 2 or 3 farther back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that my shooting lanes were clear, because you cut the main limbs and there's sprouts will come out some trees that during spring and summer and fall will grow 3 feet long, So that's just a little thing that you learn.
That's a pretty good thing. I think that most people wouldn't think about doing would be like already starting to prepare your shooting lanes, and consider the growth that was going to happen, during that next year.
Right. And you learn all that stuff the hard way. But I mean, people should be thinking, but I guess it's just experience and time that teaches it to you. And if you're not to that point yet, then it does make sense that you would not think of it. It's second nature to me, because I learned it way on in my whitetail career early on, because I was putting in as much time whitetail hunting back in the 1980s as the average bow hunter probably puts in 5 or 10 years. Yeah. I would hunt 3 months, 7 days a week, 12 hours, dark till dark. I mean, that literally sounds insane, but that's what I was doing. And so that's a cram course. And so I learned it early on, and a lot of things that I talk about now that seem to me ought to be second nature to other people, it's not. That's why maybe some of the stuff I'm putting out there will get their mind clicking and get their rear end to hopping. And I used to, like I said, drive to Illinois Friday evening, be up there at midnight, get up next morning, hit the ground running, go all day long on a place, stay right there on the place in the back of my truck, eat, lunch out of off a Coleman stove and ice chest, get up Sunday, usually scout till about 5 in the evening, drive 7 hours home, and go to work Monday morning. So
now, would you do multiple multiple places throughout that spring, or after the winter and spring?
It depends. If it was one of those years I was going to a totally new area the next year, like there were times that I'd hunted, like say, I'll just give you a quick blow by blow. Like I spent about 5 or 6 years in eastern Colorado in the 80s, and that was my absolute pinnacle place. Well, in 1 year's time, the bottom fell out of all of it, and I was just gone. I mean, all of it got leased up by outfitters. The outfitters found out what was out there, and they showed up, and they went up and down through there and got everything that a dollar could get, and all my places disappeared. So in 1 year's time, I had to move. So my next move was to Illinois, and I spent about 9 years straight there in the 90s. Lost all of that due to money again. Hunting industry and the money took it away. Had to leave there, focus solely on, I'd already been in Kansas. I'd already been hunting Kansas, but not full bore, because Illinois would be my number one spot. Then if I kill my bucks there, I would run to Kansas and try to finish out, you know. So I didn't have my Kansas places down good yet. I was still shopping around and hunting, you know, on a wing and a prayer. So when I lost Illinois, Kansas was close. So I had it made then. And yes, I would go up to Kansas maybe 6 or 8 times during the course of the dead of winter between January and March. I'd go every weekend almost. And there were days I walked 10, 12 hours. And I mean, I'm talking 15, 18 miles.
Are you almost gridding, or are you following trails or following topo where you think that they would use as a main area or a main travel route?
You got to remember, back in those days, we didn't have Google Earth and we didn't have all the technology. So all we really had was aerial, you know, we called them aerial photos. Yeah. I'd get an aerial photo of the area and I'd pick out drainages, because up in Kansas, I was hunting in this country I now kind of live in, the prairie, giant roadless country. I'm talking 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 square mile areas that didn't have no roads in them. So I had the ability to get access to some places that I could walk 12 hours and never cross a road, never see a human thing. And so I was like a kid in a candy store. And yes, I would get aerials and I would take out through the prairie and go up a drainage, go up one side of the drainage, scout the whole side of that drainage for maybe 2 or 3 miles, circle around the head of it, come back down the other side, then jump across the prairie maybe 2 miles to another creek drainage and go up it. And there was no limit to the amount of that I could do. I just had more country than I could shake a stick at back then. And you don't got to cover that kind of ground. If your place is 160 acres and yet you have not gridded it to where you know every 1 acre of it, I highly suggest you get to know every acre of it, because every single acre of that property, or at least every 10-acre blob of it, probably has a different function to the deer. They use it differently, because if you've got resident deer, you've got deer that got to have all of their life elements on that property. And that usually don't happen on one property. If you've got a property that has every single ingredient that a deer needs to live 365, you're pretty blessed. So the next thing to learn is, where are these deer going off of this property to maybe eat or hide out, you know, or whatever. Because most of your deer ain't just going to be on your place all year. And that's not real important for like maybe summer. You don't care. Maybe they were going over a mile to the west to Farmer John's over there and eating soybeans all summer. Doesn't matter that much. But when they get back and they start into their fall pattern, which they set up homekeeping on your property, then they're going to lay all that sign down that occurs during the rut. And that's all to me, that's all I cared about. I didn't really care much about how deer lived from January through September. I just didn't care. I didn't have any place to really go. I would always have to work 7 days a week that time. And so it didn't profit me to learn how to hunt them in the early season, because I would always work up until like sometimes late October, you know, before I would take. And so all I cared about was rut. I was a rut hunter. That was my total focus. I never was good at killing early season deer. I wasn't the greatest at killing what I call late season deer. Now, modern hunting is gotten that stuff down now. They've mastered it. A lot of it revolves around management and feed. And I didn't even know what those words were. I never fed or baited deer in my life. I never heard of management, didn't want to hear of management. You couldn't have crammed management down my throat. It was of no use to me because I had no place to manage, right? So I just run and gunned. All I wanted to know was what the deer were going to be doing on the piece of land that I was going to bow hunt that October and November.
Like, let's say someone does, so they go out, they see the sign, and I know what you're talking about. When you get out there, you see that bright rub that's on the tree. You see you see the cleared scrapes. You see the beaten trails that they've been hitting. Are you taking in? So you're looking at, cutting lanes to be able to stick a stand on. You're looking at wind pattern also when you're doing that.
I guess the best way to put it, and this has been something I've tried to put into words many times over the years, and I've never been able to do it, and I probably won't now. You have to learn to look at the big picture. You can't hone in on one facet. Don't just get to be a scrape hunter. Don't just get to be a trail hunter. Don't just get to be a food source hunter. Don't just get to be a bedding area. And the only way you can do what I'm talking is to live out there in the woods and spend time with the deer and hunt them till you fall out of the tree, because you can go look at all the sign they lay down, and if you don't have any idea why it's there or what's going on with it, it ain't going to do you a lot of good. But when you can look at that, like, let's say we have a 1 square mile map, and that's your hunting area, and you go walk that in January, February, March enough that you cover that whole square mile, acre by acre, a few times, and you mark down every scrape in there, every trail, every food source, every bedding, all the stuff you need to know. And then between marking it, you have walked it, lodged it in your head, and you put it in conjunction with this. I call it the big picture. In other words, those deer are living there 24/7 on that, and they do what they do. And all you have to do is look at that sign. And of course, we're talking about sign that just deals with the autumn of the year. You don't care about spring, winter, dead of winter, or summer sign. But the rut sign, that will tell you the travel movements of the deer on your property in the rut, which is during the time you can hunt them. And all you got to do then is, like, hopefully you've already pretty well figured out your access into spots. You mark you down potential stand sites in there. And I always mark every single potential wind direction that they can be hunted with, and go in there and cut them out, 5 or 6 of them for, 5 or 6 different winds, figure out your access, and I mean, I go crazy with that. Sometimes I will really work hard to try to get into these stands as what am I trying to say, is without alerting the deer,
Undetected is what you're trying to say.
I will literally go way out of the way and walk up the bottoms of gullies and ravines. I'm liable to use water access. You know what I mean? I like to get into a spot. You don't just pick a stand and just come traipsing right through the middle of all your hunting country for half a mile to get back into it.
Yeah. So wind is going to be a factor. Well, whether or not you're walking through the area that they're already in is going to be a factor. That's definitely one. And now some people only have certain access too, so they may have to determine whether or not the wind is going to be blowing their scent right into the area that they're going to be hunting into.
Yes, get you at least, just start off with the basics. Like I call the basics 4 wind directions: east, west, north, and south. In that area of yours that you're hunting, once you've scouted it till you know it inside out, and once you've saw everything about it, the lay of the land. Another thing is knowledge of how deer use the lay of the land to move through it. That sign will be put down in the travel corridors, and the travel corridors are determined by the lay of the land. Deer use the topography and the vegetation to travel through their country, and they use it for security and food and things like that. And you've got to be able to look at not just the trails and the scrapes and the rubs and things. You've got to look at why they're there. Why is this trail here? Well, chances are, maybe, for instance, it's on the backside of a little ridge that's secluded, and there is a big thicket along the top that gives them that. I mean, them deer can run up and down that ravine for, 200 or 300 yards from point A to B and not have worries of anybody even knowing, seeing, or nothing. They're much into security, is what I'm saying. And then, the bucks in the middle of November, you don't have to worry about all that. Just get on those rub and scrape lines and sit there, and one of them's going to come staggering by. That sounds simple, but that's pretty much the way it is. Even in bad places, if you sit there during a rut, and I don't mean just 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. I mean, to get the results I got, you have to hunt the way I did, which is I mainly hunted all day long, every day I could, from about November the 5th or 10th on through the end of November, because I probably killed half of my big bucks between 10 in the morning and 2 in the evening. So if you just think right there how many I wouldn't have got, half of them, by just hunting standard hunts, you got to decide how bad you want to get in on all this, because if you're going to be a weekend warrior, and hunt at a very recreational level, then be happy with the results. Don't run yourself down for not killing a pile of great big bucks all the time, which I've seen. I've seen more people gripe at me and whine at me about, oh, well, I'm not getting it done, and you're doing something, you're poaching, or you're doing something nobody can kill. And then, they will in the same line tell you, well, I only get to hunt 2 days a week, and I only hunt 2.5, 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening.
Yeah, and that's going to be another thing that people aren't going to realize, of how much effort that you put into it, and
yes.
And that's going to be another thing that I want to do here. We want to harness some of this information, or what we can harness, so that we can share it. But the other thing that I think that people would be interested in is, I kind of coined it to you one time before, was like brushes with death with Eddie Claypool. So I think that if you've got time. So we kind of got that, a couple of things that people can grasp onto, but the things that you have done to learn these things, and the places you've put yourself, that would be something I think people would be interested in. And there's one story that you got that's you can tell that's relatively short. And it's about sleeping under. Wasn't it a granite cliff during a lightning storm?
Yeah, well, no, I had to get away from that because the storm came out. I can't put my one-man tent above timberline under this overhang, because if it ever rains or sleets at night, just best to be out of it. Well, during the middle of the night, it didn't rain or sleet, but it come a thunderstorm down the mountain range, and it was one of them dry thunderstorms that lightning and massive thunder woke me up, and I'm like, that thing is going to end up right down here on me, because I was on the Continental Divide in Colorado, which is a long, high 20, 30, 40, 50 mile long ridge of peaks,
Yeah.
And that storm was on it about 3-4 miles down it from me, and I was awake long enough to tell that it's coming down the divide toward me. And so I was like, I got to get out from under here, because that's where the lightning strikes, is cliff faces and rocks and junk. So I moved my one man in the dark, got up and drug it off the side of the mountain down there, a couple of 100 yards onto a little spot. I was still above timberline though, and I did not like that. But this was a pretty big mess to do in the dark in some really rugged country, and I didn't like it. So I got back in it. About an hour later, that storm is getting plumb down there to me, and that lightning was coming down and hitting. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I laid right there and watched it, and it ended up at one point striking that very cliff face thing I had been under up there, probably 5 or 10 times, and that was only like 200 yards from me. And you'd lay there and be watching, and when that bolt appeared, it would appear in a millisecond. It looked like it was like, I don't even know how to describe it. It looked like that was like 3 to 6 feet wide, and it would just appear out of the black, attached to the ground. It would put your eyes out instantly. You're blinded, and before you could even register that you were blinded, the sonic boom would go by, because I mean, it's only having sounds traveling 200 feet there, right?
Yeah.
That's probably a fifth of a, no, that's probably a tenth of a second. That's less than a tenth of a second, right?
At 200 foot, yeah.
So anyway, and it was blowing big explosions of rock off of that. Rock was raining down around me. And I literally thought that night that I had bought the farm, because I thought I was going to meet my maker. I just figured one of them things is going to hit me or hit close enough. And it didn't. I was too scared to get out of my tent and try to get off the mountain, because I was afraid if I stood up, I'd be like a lightning rod, you know? And I laid right there, and about 30 minutes that went on. And I told the good Lord, if this is the end of me, then I'm sorry for what I did wrong, and don't find any fault with me. I'll meet you on the other side. But I got through it. But boy, I tell you one thing, you live and learn. That was the last time that I camped on the highest point above timberline in the summer in the Rockies, because them storms brew up whenever they feel like it, you know. And I'll tell you,
that was a elk trip? Was that an elk trip or?
Yeah. Elk and mule deer hunt up above timberline in the really high country of Colorado. I was camped at about 13,000 feet high, up on the very highest stuff.
And you were alone, is that right? Alone.
Yeah, everything I did was alone. I used to go up there and stay 7 weeks at a time, and during that time I might have a buddy or two come up and stay 10, 12 days here and there once in a while. But yeah, I was a solo hunter. I was living large. That was the best days of my life. I've never ever been more alive. I've never been more strong. I've never been more. That was the good days.
Well, I mean, I've heard a bunch of these stories, and we wouldn't be able to capture them. But I think that just there, you've got so many, and hopefully we can share them with these people, so they can see like what effort you put into learning these things, to be able to give them a little bit of an insight as to just to make them a slightly better hunter. And if they take it all, they can become a very good one. And I mean, I've learned quite a bit from you over the years. So mine's improving. I'm nowhere even close to where I could be. But
well, that's the good thing. Enjoy those years right there, because if you ever get it mastered, then you go into some other realm. It'll be different. Stay in that hungry stage. Stay in that stage of learning, where it's such a challenge and so satisfying to accomplish. I don't really think most people ever get a chance to mature with it to the point I have. Probably it's not going to happen for them, and that's good, really. I know that sounds weird, because everybody strives to get it mastered and get to where maybe they have this place of their own and everything. And that's like that carrot dangling right in front of your face. You're snapping at it, but you can't quite get it, so you keep trying. But when you finally get a hold of it one day and bite it in half and go to eating it, you go, good God, why was I after that so much? That wasn't the greatest thing after all, So stay hungry, stay striving, stay dreaming. That's the key, dreaming. Stay hoping and dreaming, and don't just want to be the best, and don't just want to be the richest, because when you get to be the richest and the best, you won't have any more goals in life, and you can probably just shoot yourself.
Yeah. I'm going to be having more of Eddie talking about different facets of the bow hunting world and how it can help us become better hunters. So if you've got questions for Eddie, or you want to expand on more topics, just put them in the comments below. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.